Yo, what's up, fam?
Morning.
Morning. Happy Sunday. Yep.
Mm. All right.
So
If you
yeah, we
say so. If you say so.
we'll see. I know we were supposed to have Angela and Nirvana today. Unfortunately, couldn't hook it up. So, uh, hopefully we'll have her onto the program at another time. I think CO is in the building.
I'll add her
So
to the stream.
add her. What's up,
Yeah,
CO?
I'm doing good. How y'all doing today?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Sunday. That's what they say,
Sunday.
according to the.
Day.
Yeah, we rest on Sunday, right? But no rest for the weary.
Right. No days off, eh?
All right.
Man.
Well, let's get into it, Moya. I'm gonna let you kick it off with a little housekeeping here.
All right, let's do it, fam. All right, so if anyone needs show intros, show outros, voiceovers, script copy, 15 and 30-second promos, it's a 48-day business turnaround. Hit us up at ETM Media Group. That's ETM MEDIA GROUP. ETM Media Group at gmail.com. Yep. So yeah, so let's I guess get into it. This is going to be a pretty short program show today, and because I definitely wanted to get Angela's perspective, but we'll see if we can substitute for a little bit. And I guess let's talk about brother George Floyd and sister Breonna Taylor. May they rest in
Yeah, there's
power.
been a lot of anniversaries in the news. You know, as we went into COVID, as we saw with Ahmaud Arbery, that's one. Has anyone followed that case pretty closely? I know that you know the killers, the murderers, they were apprehended. I believe they're still in jail, but I know that there was some big DA cover up initially. And what happened is the voters in Georgia actually did vote the DA out that was responsible for the cover up. So there was some form, I guess. I mean, of accountability. I won't say justice, some form of accountability uh, on the part of the DA. And I believe the assailants are apprehended, but I didn't see anything on how much time they've got, and I don't know where they are on the trial. And also, the murderers were not, law enforcement, so they were just civilians. So maybe that's why they got a little more justice than what we're seeing in the Breonna Taylor case. And of course, we're all watching the George Floyd jury selection, and we'll see what happens with that. Now, for Breonna Taylor, a year after Breonna Taylor's killing, family says there's no accountability. Exactly 1 year ago, Louisville police gunned her down in her home. Now her name is ubiquitous rallying cry at protests calling for police reforms, and many social justice advocates point to her story as an example of how difficult it can be to hold police accountable for violent acts. A year after Taylor's death, none of the officers who fired their service weapons, a total of 32 rounds, have faced criminal charges directly over Taylor's killing. At least three officers with connections to the raid have been terminated from the force. In September, the city of Louisville announced a $12 million settlement in the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Taylor's family, which also included several police reforms. City officials also banned no-knock warrants.
Wow. So I know CO. I definitely want to get your opinion, especially because you're always boots on the ground, doing wonderful street journalism. And so what's your thoughts on what the city of Louisville have I guess, basically said what they were going to do or want to do regarding Breonna Taylor.
Can you, before I respond to that, can you repeat that last bit? You said that they're banning no not warrants, and what was the bit you said right before that?
Let me get back to that. In September, the city of Louisville announced a $12 million settlement in the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Taylor's family, which also included several police reforms, very, very vague on what those
Yeah.
reforms were. And then the last sentence is city officials have also banned no knock warrants. So,
Yeah. So I would be very curious to learn more about what those police reforms are. I personally am an abolitionist. I don't believe that we can reform the police state or their use in our community. I do think that they fully need to be eradicated. So no matter how comprehensive those reforms are, I am going to be on the side of it doesn't matter, it's not enough because they need to be eradicated. But I am curious to see what they did agree to. Banning the no knock warrants, um, to me, that's a bare minimum. If you were going after a subject, um, um, you shouldn't need a no knock warrant. You never would have needed a no knock warrant to apprehend someone. Not when you have the full force behind you, guns and endless men and women who will shoot upon anything. And to be honest, their no knock warrant isn't what led to Breonna Taylor's death, right? What led to that was gross negligence. They had the wrong address. They were looking for someone who had already been apprehended earlier in the day. And there is a huge connection, which I have not gone too deep into it. But part of the reason why they dismissed that individual who, um, oh, sorry, I just blanked on his name. But the reason why the people voted him out is because the building that Breonna Taylor lived in, they had been trying to push people out of. So part of this raid wasn't like the excuse that they were looking for this individual who was already apprehended. There were alternative motives that the police were being used for to push people out of that location so that construction and other such stuff can occur. So to me, part of the reason why police need to be completely eradicated is because they are just the strong arm of the bourgeoisie. They are the strong arm of the state and property owners and rich folks. So they are at their beck and call, and they always stand. The police are always used as like their armed force, and we can see that this happened here with Breonna Taylor. Like a no knock warrant would not have stopped them from firing all of those bullets into her home, right? The no knock warrant didn't provide a level of safety or a level of like a bubble or anything around her boyfriend, who I'm currently blanking on. But he who was exercising his Second Amendment right fired one shot and a warning shot into the air because he thought that they were being robbed, essentially, that people were breaking in. He was charged and he was assaulted and he was thrown in jail, and they tried to force him to lie and not cheat, but lie on Breonna Taylor and lie in order to make their story better in the end. And we know that, fortunately, I believe he's been released. I believe like he is now suing um, for their mistreatment and mishandling of that entire thing. But I'm quite curious, just as in the George Floyd situation, all of the protocols and all of the laws and such that they and policies that they implemented after the fact would not have saved George Floyd. And I'm curious for Breonna Taylor, would they have actually saved her, right? Because we know that they're not holding folks accountable, right? That's a whole different thing. We want to stop Black life, but they're also not holding these folks accountable. They lost their jobs, but they can still go to a whole nother station and get their job right back at the same salary and move forward as if nothing has ever happened.
okay, you touched on some points. So are they still actively trying to move people out of that building, and are they trying to move them out for development purposes? Do you know?
It did have to do with development purposes. And whether they're still trying to, whether it's now that the Breonna Taylor case has blown or brought more eyes to that, I don't know I don't know what their intent are anymore. And like I said, I haven't been following it that deep. But there are people in that local area and people, across the country who are. So I would definitely encourage people to go do that research and find that out. If that's a particular case that or a particular fight that you want to join in or support.
Okay, that caught my attention because sometimes you hear that if a horrific or tragic incident happens at a building or property, that decreases its value, could potentially make it easier for developers to come in and cheaper, since now it is the site of a murder scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Well,
Chris is
looks like we
joining us. I'm
have
going to let
Chris in
him
the
in
building.
to the stream.
Oh, Chris is in the building.
What's up, family? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
brother.
yes,
What's going
I can
on,
hear
man?
you.
What's going on? Happy Sunday. I love the topic. I love the commentary already. Good morning once again. And if you don't mind, I want to jump right in if you don't mind, because I was listening to what CEO had to say.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
Man, he was about to go in, and then the trolls.
The trolls came through. Had to shut it down. Don't worry, we're gonna get him right back. Chris' voice
yeah,
is
and I remember now the charge that was filed was wanton endangerment. I remember I never heard that before, and I don't think I've ever heard it again. But that's where they were just charged with shooting randomly at the building and the walls, but nobody was ever charged for shooting Breonna and killing Breonna. And I know you guys took the streets last week in SoCal for the anniversary of Breonna's death. What was the climate or the energy? Why were people protesting?
People are out there for a myriad of reasons, to be honest. And down here in LA, I can speak to at least 3 actions that occurred on that Saturday. But there were several. There were several all over Southern California. But many people came out to continue to express their disappointment and their disgust at the fact that this young Black woman was asleep in her bed and was murdered by the police, who, due to the existing policies and due to really just systematic racism, her death was just not only was it one attempted to be swept under the rug, 2, that they tried to attack the Black male in her life. 3, the only bit of retribution that occurred, as you just said, was because they shot into a wall, and that charge really has to do with you are never, well, cops, but even when you, at least in California, when you take your cert to purchase a gun, you have to take your test. You're not, they're very clear on you're never supposed to shoot in a direction where you don't know what is behind, right? So that's what the officers were essentially charged for. They were shooting at something, but they didn't know if there was someone standing behind the wall. They didn't know if there was another kid, if there was another adult. They didn't know that. So they got in trouble for shooting in a direction that they shouldn't have been shooting in because they didn't have visibility, right? They didn't get in trouble for killing a human being. Right. So at the end of the day, a lot of people came out because that is unacceptable. Right. It is unacceptable to have a job where you can murder someone, whether it's an accident or not, but where you can murder someone and not be held accountable, and be held accountable, meaning lose your job, lose your pay, like something severe other than
go to jail.
Right. Right. And it's the same thing. Like doctors, EMT folks, they have people's lives in their hands all the time, and they can make mistakes, and often make mistakes that result in the death of an individual. right? Lawyers who have people's lives in their hands, if they make mistakes, if they are grossly negligent, it affects their career. It affects their livelihood. They can they can get, what do you call it? Get kicked out of the bar, right? Pay fines, get lots of stuff, right? Everything, a teacher, if you bag groceries, like there are consequences for not showing up and for doing damage to the people who are around you. Except cops have this impunity beyond cops and many other people, but specifically cops have this impunity. So there's a lot of anger surrounding the fact that everyone believes, like, well, now I won't say everyone, but there was this belief that once we had our first Black president, oh, we're in a post-racial environment. But now more and more people are seeing and living firsthand, no, that's not true. We can have a Black president, we can have people, Black faces in high places, but it doesn't change the fabric of our laws and our policies. And people took to the streets to push back on that and to demand change, because it's not happening. While people are pushing for it legislatively, it is not happening soon enough, right? And so people are still speaking to their outrage.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we need to look further at what these other reforms that they glossed over in the article are. It seems the only one that they pointed out is the no-knock warrant. So it would be interesting to find out what these other reforms are. What are your thoughts on that, Umoya?
Well, I like to keep my answers short, sweet, and to the point. Yeah, it's just another way to BS the people. I don't even know. I mean, until we see what kind of reforms they're going to make for right, in quotes, for not only Breonna, but George Floyd, and just in general, it's just all smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned. I know there's been some talks about quote unquote defunding the police, and putting some of those resources into mental health, and more of the social and civic areas, dealing with some of these unfortunate situations, dealing with the cops and the police, which I'm all down for. I think some resources need to be sent to other parts of both the federal and state workers. Do I think we need police? That's subjective. I mean, if people were civil enough with one another, no. I mean, but we supposedly live in a civil society, and actually we don't. The place that we live in, called the United States of America, is very hypocritical. And one day, actually, I want to do a show dealing with the overseers, as we call them, because the police actually started way beyond, or way before, the police academy as we know it, and police fraternities actually started way before. And I don't want to go too deep into it, but basically it pretty much started during the times when our ancestors were enslaved, during U.S. chattel slavery, and since then. So we have to just go deeper into it, and I wish some of the media would actually go deeper into that information. But since they aren't, our platforms, and many of our platforms should do justice and bring the correct information. But I know Chris is back, and I'm sure he wants to get his 10 cents in, because we putting 10 on the 20.
Yeah, 10 cents before my connection drops.
Got the trolls.
Sorry about that.
All right, bro, I'll let you go in.
Excuse me, pardon me. Thank y'all for having this conversation right now, because it's important that we continue this type of discussion through the first few months, few days of the Biden administration, and also throughout the entirety of the new administration, right? One of the dangers of what we saw, and we saw this coming last year, right? But one of the dangers of having like someone like Biden come in is that like people get like kind of disengaged or relaxed in some ways, or not paying as much attention to some of the same issues that were making us go out and get pepper sprayed and beat with the whatever the hell they were beating us with, and the flash bang grenades, right? All of the stuff that animated us so much over the last year and several years, right? That energy is in danger of going away. And so, one, it's important for us to keep talking about this. Secondly, just to jump right into sort of the meat of the conversation here in terms of reforms, right? The quote unquote reforms, right? So the no knock warrant stuff. Yeah, it's good to not be able to bust in somebody place, without knocking, and that's, yeah. I mean, it sounds almost like common sense, right? One of the things though that we have, listen, all this stuff is good, but if and I think California has a read on this that I want to explore, because all that stuff is good, but until there is police officers that get indicted, tried, and convicted and sentenced with the appropriate charges and the appropriate sentences for murder in many of these cases, a lot of the other stuff that we're doing is great, but ultimately it's less accountability than we need, right? We talk about accountability.
Man, looks like Chris is going again. Them trolls, man, them trolls.
I concur where he was going with the accountability. He's spot on. Until there is true, like, I'm less interested in finagling the system itself as I am in making sure that the system is working for the people. And right now it's not. There is no accountability. Cops can do and will continue to kill with impunity. And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Theo.
No, I was just gonna say that that's just unacceptable. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was going to interject and say that another thing too are some of these police officers aren't actually, they don't grow up in those communities, right? So when you don't have a pulse on what's going on in that community, and you don't have any relation to that community, and this is both black and white, you don't really know anybody in that. So, if something happens, it's kind of like I'm kind of standoffish on it, just on a moral level, right? Because I don't know this person, and it really doesn't mean anything. And not saying that a person who happens to know somebody still can do something egregious, right? Because it could still happen. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys can confirm this or not, but I think I heard or read something that George Floyd, whatever the guy's name, Calvin, Derek
Mhm.
Calvin, I think is his name.
Chauvin,
Calvin?
Chavin.
Chavin. Anyway, whatever the dude's name is, that they even previously knew each other or even met each other
They work together.
or worked together at one
Mhm.
point. So, that even goes to show you that even in some cases, even that type of relationship doesn't matter, because once again, we're still working in a system where unfortunately black people who have been involved in the U.S. chattel slavery, our descendants, unfortunately, we're still on the bottom tier, right, of everybody, regardless of how much money we make, what kind of education that we receive. Uh, Overall, that's how we're looked at as a group. And so going back to what I was saying, if you aren't involved in the community and you haven't grown up in that particular community, then it just unfortunately creates some uh, dynamics and situations where if they did, happen to be a part of that community, it would probably be, it might even turn out, differently. So I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah. If I can add to that a little bit, one of the dangers, or not, I wouldn't say danger, but an additional side effect of not having individuals who live in the communities that they are serving is that it is draining our community of resources. So take, for instance, in Linwood, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, the majority of the Sheriff's Department does not live in the cities that they are working in, right? But they are paid by those cities. So they take the money from that city and then go spend it somewhere else. They go buy a house in a different city. They send their kids to a different location, schooling. They shop, whether it's supermarket shopping, whether it's clothing shopping or such. So they are literally taking money out of our cities and moving it somewhere else, right? So they are not buying a house in our communities, which is helping to keep, the money's going towards our schools higher, right? Because we know the correlation between our public schools and the taxes on the houses in that area, right? So there's an issue, there's a multi-layered issue of individuals not serving their community. Another part of that is also like the mentality, which you kind of touched on, Eloya, in sense of like, I often feel like the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, because this is where I live, and when I lived in New York, absolutely them as well, they are an occupied force. Right. So they come in with a specific mentality about what their definition of protection is. And that protection is always protection of property and protection of the rich against the people. So they are coming into, particularly, let's say, Linwood and places and south of the 10, which is where most of the Black people who are left in LA live. They come in these areas and it's always force, right? Every article that you saw about the 2020 uprisings, whether it was LA or anywhere else, said that the police always had excessive force and that they were the ones who were usually escalating the events. And I will say that firsthand, being on the ground. People show up to protest, to mourn. That is like gathering together in groups. When we are going through pain is something that most people do, but specifically our people. And when that happens, it is seen as a threat. The mere fact that we are gathering. So when they show up with guns, like all swatted out, with their pepper spray, with their bulletproof vests, it is sending that message that we are here to contain, we are here to control, rather than we are here to work in. I didn't see any local police officers being upset that one of their own killed somebody else, and that is unacceptable, right? We always hear about that one bad apple, but what is everybody else doing, right? They're still showing up, right? When they were, I know I'm getting on a roll, so let me fall back because Chris is here. Let me fall back so he can step up. But there's a lot of issues with folks not living in the communities that they're serving. You're on mute, Chris.
I was saying, go in.
I'll be getting on my soapbox and just be going too far, too much.
But you make some good points, CO, about the militarization of the police. I mean, they're just in here like full on military ops in these neighborhoods. And like you say, when they villainize the people that they're sworn to protect and serve, like you said, they villainized Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. They tried to villainize him. They tried to get him to villainize her. So, I mean, while these lax police laws and, lax reforms are to blame, obviously, but so is the mass media, in the way that they portray the victims. I mean, we see a case in the news right now that Aaron Long, I think his name is, the Asian murderer. I can't even find a lot of information about him because they basically scrubbed his information offline. They don't want us to see anything about him, but what they're reporting in the news is that he's this sympathetic character that was having a bad day, and it just goes on, and they just try to humanize the white murderers and villainize the Black people who are being killed, the victims, villainize the victims that are being murdered with impunity. So the mass media is also to blame for this.
Great point, Kim.
Yeah, and I want to follow on that if I could while I'm here. When my connection is bugging. The media part, and so the mass media, right? So you're talking, I think 100% correctly, Kim, when you're talking.
Oh, no.
Without fail. Chris goes in and cut.
Yeah, I concur with everything you just said, Kim. It took 2020 and it took a lot of my on the ground work to recognize how much the media, at least in LA, is being used to control narratives, to squash dissent, and to really just as an arm for the propaganda that's out there. And I'll just give a really quick example. There was a lot of on the ground folks started getting more and more support because LAPD and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department were just shooting like pepper ball spray, stinger grenades, tear gas, all types of quote unquote non-lethal ammunition, and misusing that ammunition. So they were hitting people point blank range. They were hitting people in their heads. I had a friend have permanent damage to his eye when he was hit, and many things. And because of the use of social media, a lot of the visuals were getting out, where you would just see a line of cops just shooting indiscriminately into the crowd because one person did something that they did not like, right? So when we started showing a lot of this, we realized that the media came back with their own narrative about how about outside agitators. And that was a quote: outside agitators are coming in who don't live in this neighborhood, who are causing destruction. And every single solitary news outlet in LA who covered it used that exact same phrasing. And when I was on the ground at a press release with the National Lawyers Guild, who has filed a class action lawsuit against LAPD, I believe it is. It's either LAPD or LASD, I can't remember which one. But at a news conference, it's LASD, the sheriff's department literally pushed up and kicked out the lawyers from the place that they were standing, the place where they were giving their stuff, and got really aggressive, came out with their paper spray, like their guns, the non-lethal weapons and such. But what stuck out to me was the reporter who was for like one of the local news channels was going around and asking people in the crowd, I need a soundbite. What do you have to say about outside agitators who are coming in, destroying, right? It wasn't an open-ended question. It wasn't a, hey, what is your experience? It wasn't anything like that. It was very specific. I need a quote on this for this news. And I asked her, I was like, were you given this suit? Were you told that this was the story? Or did you come out to find the story? Or just to like enlighten what is happening, or like shed light on what is happening? And it got because of the shares pushing up and because of a lot of craziness that happened, that and another time when I was on the ground and they were doing a live feed, this newswoman flat out said, you know, protesters can't be out here doing donuts. You can't be out here destroying stuff. You can't be out here like you can celebrate, enjoy, but don't be out here doing this type of stuff. And I'm standing in the background because I was watching and recording. The cops had pulled over some folks who were like celebrating in the streets. They had pulled them over because there were people sitting on top of the cars and hanging out of the windows. But this newscaster used that as a background to talk about behavior that was not even going on, and using it to shed negative light on the people who were out there protesting. And so in the background on live TV, I'm like, that's not what happened. She's lying. Like, because I was there. She showed up to do that. And I had been there for hours. I was with the crowd and saw what was going on. And there was like this huge pushback of like, no, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And I was like, okay, well, where are the tire marks? Anybody who's doing donuts, everybody knows at least tire marks. Where are they? Like, where's the spray paint that you're talking about? Where's this destruction that you're talking about? Because really it was just people dancing on top of their cars and in the streets and like letting out all of that energy. But the narrative from the media is destructive, right? It's you shouldn't be supporting this. It's everything anti, but it's coming from a very clear and distinct voice. It isn't one of discovery. It is, this is what is happening. And I saw it and I watched it firsthand, and I stopped trusting in even liberal news once I had that firsthand experience, because it was like, oh, y'all are just saying whatever your boss or whoever is creating the narrative, y'all are just disseminating it, and it just is what it is, regardless of what's actually happening. So even though, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So pull full circle. I gave an interview. I'm forgetting her name, but it was a local LA reporter who was actually attacked by Los Angeles police and arrested and mistreated. This whole craziness. But I gave an interview with her where I said the only people who are coming from outside the community and causing damage is the Los Angeles Police Department. Right, is the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. They literally don't live here, but they come here and bring destruction, right? When they shoot up our neighborhoods, when they gas our kids with chemicals that even the UN says would be considered a war crime. They come in our neighborhoods and gas like our babies' lungs, and then get upset when people like respond to that, right? And then try to paint the people who are saying this behavior is unacceptable as troublemakers, as outside agitators.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, Sia, when it comes to the narrative that mass media portrays often, is that part of the ETM, and I'll get to my point, part of the amend the mass media logo is, if you notice, it's F and F within the ETM, if you notice that. And that means, facts over fiction, right? And so dealing with mass media, not all outlets, but some outlets they'd rather hype something up to get the news ratings instead of just telling the story as is. I do have a degree in journalism and telecommunications, and so I'm quote unquote certified to talk about this because I've been colleged, quote unquote. A degree is degree, whatever. But one of the tenets, that I try to live by is trying to give, factual information over hype. Even if that means that our ratings won't be good, or we won't be getting more likes, or we won't be getting more view counts because we're not down with the beef and all that other stuff, or trying to cause beef. Oftentimes we want to try to just give the news, give information to people, so people have it, and they can decide, and make the choice. Is this factual? Is this true? Or is this false? Is it fiction or is it nonfiction? So I just wanted to touch on that point, CO, because you definitely brought some valid points to that.
Yeah, just the facts, definitely. Now we can have some kind of hope for police reform and legislation and things like that. What hope do we have to change this narrative that the mass media is pushing? I mean, could there be reforms to the media? I don't know. I mean, are they just going to be allowed to operate with impunity and spew whatever narrative it is, whatever's the flavor of the day, the month, or
Well,
the week?
yeah, I'll answer that question and then I'll let CO go in just real quick, about 30 seconds. Just doing, what independent news is doing. Because as CO was saying, I mean, if people look into, the Associated Press, and if they're involved with the Associated Press, I mean, basically it's funneled through one entity, and then everybody reports off the AP, right? So that's it. So in order for it to change, I mean, you'd have to be in the system that doesn't want change. I mean, all these other news outlets, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to give any shine, these so-called liberal outlets. I mean, I hardly heard or seen anybody yet when, we're talking about reparations, anybody who's of the ADOS camp, or whatever you want to term yourself, reparationist camp or whatever, on some of these liberal outlets. I just haven't seen us. I mean, on Rarity, will you see us speaking about our livelihood, our points, and our narrative? So unfortunately, Kim, I mean, at this point, it is what it is. And, people, independent news outlets are just going to have to keep telling, our stories the way that we're telling them. And we're going to have to keep, telling the stories like our brother Chris, because he's trying to get in.
Yeah,
and hopefully
man.
he can tell his story.
We got him.
I see you keep popping in and out.
I'm trying, and I'm gonna
Pop
keep
up,
trying.
bro, pop up.
Go, just jump in. You only got 30 seconds. Go.
Yeah, right. Let me get it in. So I am 100% committed to making sure that I contribute to this conversation, because it's a really good conversation. On the media piece, I write for a local paper here in the Sacramento area. I know very well what goes on the inside of these media organizations. And a lot of times what happens is we'll get something like a statement from the cops for something, whatever it is, and we'll just reproduce that statement without any challenging it, without any questioning it, without any sort of critical look at it. We just reproduce, re-say, regurgitate what the police media people, and the police have their own media teams.
He was 100% correct.
Yep.
He is 100% correct. There is this, I think that's also part of white supremacy, right? It's part of that notion that the cops are good, the cops are doing their job, and if you have an interaction with them, that automatically means that you have done something wrong, right? So if a cop writes something on their report, it is factual, right? They are automatically given that power. They are automatically given that ability to just be right 100% of the time, even though we know that there is no human that is. And if you go and fight up against them, you are not just fighting that individual and what they wrote, you are fighting the entire institution behind them, right? And their resources and their people, their ties to like just white supremacy as a whole, and just subjugation of people. So it's hard. And I know I can give another example in LA where there was an individual who is in a wheelchair. He's an avid activist person on the ground. And the cops beat the crap out of him. Like they broke his chair. Like it was all on camera. And what the news reported the next day was literally what the cops put in their report, what they were told to say. And when a lot of the street journalists went to find that writer for the LA, I believe it was the LA Times, went to find that writer and speak to them like, hey, there were witnesses, right? This wasn't like, oh, this happened in seclusion over here, there's no video. There were firsthand witnesses. There were multiple camera phone video of what occurred. And the writer flat out said, this was told to me by my boss that I was supposed to run this story. So no, I did not go find anyone to corroborate or even to speak against it for dissent. They just ran with the story. And then individuals who were taught like me, hey, when you read the paper, they have to have sources. They have to there is a level of professionalism that goes with being a journalist, and the responsibility of being a journalist and putting this information out into the world. And the journalist was like, I did what I was supposed to do. This is what my boss told me to do. So I did it. And no, I didn't do any research. I didn't do any follow-ups. I didn't question anything. I just followed through. And I would believe that many journalists are doing the same thing, particularly folks who are doing like written word, if you're working for a newspaper. All of the newspapers at this point, not all of them, but the majority of newspapers have been bought up by millionaires and billionaires, who now have the ability to control what goes through and what doesn't go through, what to focus and not. So to answer your question a little bit earlier that you had asked, Kim, about like, what can we do about the media? Can we reform them? I don't know. I'm not a journalist. That is not what I studied in school. I do look at myself as a street journalist, like very guerrilla. I'm out there with a camera, and my voice, and that's it.
Well, yeah, I just want to say, CO, you're just as much of a journalist as anybody who's hired with, a call ID lettered company, period. I think oftentimes, in general, I think we get caught up, and I'm just talking about the society. We get caught up in words, in wordplay, in corporate structures, and government sayings, and what we're told to do and how to do about it. Information is information, right? And if the information is there, if you're filming, regardless if it's on a $10,000 broadcast camera or on your cell phone, that information, excuse me, is being documented. So I'm just we're fortunate to have you on this platform, and to you giving your beautiful dollar and not just 2 cents. And yeah, and you're a humble person, so we appreciate that, and your take. But I mean, just someone who's actually quote unquote and I'm just saying degreed in journalism. There is no written rule in it. People make up rules all day to benefit themselves. And when it comes to journalism, if you're documenting it and you're telling it as it is what it is.
That's why it's important for these independent media companies to, tell their side, or at least their perspective. Because like CEO said, these are privately held corporations, these media companies. So I don't know, what hope we can have for any kind of legislative reform against them. But I mean, I know over the last couple of weeks or so, the narrative that they have been trying to push as far as the Asian hate crime, you would have thought that it was, black on Asian crime, black on Asian crime. That's all you saw in the news. That's all you saw until this white supremacist comes out to Georgia and kills a bunch of Asian people. And they don't even really want to report that story. And like I said, when they do report it, they're very sympathetic to the murderer, and saying he has a bad day, and we're going to have to watch this case and see what happens with him and what type of punishment he receives for his crime, because they're really trying to water it down. So let's see.
We're like what, 50
Oh no, I
minutes
was just
in?
going to move on to the next.
Okay.
But what were you going to say, Yamoya?
No, I was just saying, I can't believe, I was trying to see if we can get out here in like 15, 20 minutes. It's 50 minutes into the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to discuss, once you start pulling back the layers. So let's see, what do we have going on with the George Floyd? That's coming up. Judge denies request to delay move Derek Chauvin trial after George Floyd's settlement announcement. A judge said Friday he won't delay the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who is charged with murder and manslaughter in George Floyd's death. Chauvin's attorneys have raised concerns that the $27 million settlement for Floyd's family could taint the jury pool. The judge will allow limited evidence from when George was arrested in 2019. Meanwhile, a 13th juror was seated Friday, a woman who said she has only seen clips of the video of Floyd's arrest and needs to learn more about what happened beforehand. The jury will include 12 jurors and 2 alternatives, and jury selection will continue on Monday. So, the first thing that pops out at me in reading this passage is there was no arrest. It was a murder. There was no George Floyd arrest. We're talking about George Floyd's murder, which I've called a snuff film, because that's what it was.
Interesting.
So,
it was. You're right, Kim. I mean, it was a straight up murder. I mean, even I think they did 2 autopsy reports, and I think it was the second autopsy report. I could be wrong, but if I recall correctly, that I believe it was the private autopsy came back as saying that basically Derek Chauvin, George Floyd's death was caused by Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd. So, I mean, it's open and shut for me. I mean, it's evident. It's right there. It's like, dude, you literally killed another human being. Like, we just saw you do that. So we'll see. So go ahead, CEO.
I don't have faith in the system. Rather, my faith in the system is that it will support white supremacy, right? So, and anti-Blackness, which go hand in hand. And to me, Breonna Taylor was an open and shut case, right? Trayvon Martin was an open and shut case, right? Ahmaud Arbery is an open and shut case.
Ahmaud Arbery, when I saw that, my first thing was, who's shooting this? Who? Because they were just talking about the 2 murderers. When I'm like, well, somebody's shooting the film. I was like, that is a tracking shot. I was like, they out here like making movies of killing people. So they finally did, like I said, they went to jail. We'll have to see what type of time they get. As far as George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, why is he the only one we're talking about? There were 3 other officers involved in this murder. So what happened to them? What type of time are they getting? And then as far as finding an untainted jury, do we think that that's even possible?
It's not possible to put together a jury that is not affected by white supremacy. It's not. I don't care if you're black or you're white or you're Asian or you're anything else, anything in America, because it is too woven into the fabric of our society, right? So it is impossible to separate, I believe it was Yumoya who you mentioned it earlier, like that police are automatically associated with truth, with right, with accurate, right? It's impossible to separate that. Not impossible, but it is really hard to find jurors who are like, no, I am completely, have had blinders on my entire life, and I will only look at this for the facts and just the facts, right? You are affected by your life. You're affected by your privileges. You're affected by your lack of privileges. So the idea that, hey, in the civil suit, the family was awarded, what was it, 27 million in the George Floyd case, in the civil suit that his family filed for wrongful death. 100% right. That was an absolute wrongful death. Had Chauvin not kneeled on his neck, he would still be alive, presuming he didn't have another encounter with police at a different point in time, resulting in his death. So the idea that a civil case needs to be completely and utterly kept separate from the criminal case, I agree, because they're two different courts and they have two different level of what do you call it? What's the term that they always use? Like
jurisdiction, maybe?
Jurisdiction, absolutely, but also like the burden of proof. Right. So the burden of proof is completely different in a civil case than it is in a just lost the word again.
Criminal case. Shouldn't a civil case only come after the criminal portion is
completed? They're two different jurisdictions. So in theory, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to.
Should it be? But should it be?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, would that make a difference? Because I believe, I know Angela was supposed to join us. I was watching her very detailed YouTube show that she put together on this whole jury selection situation. But it looks like even two juries were unseated after the settlement occurred because they felt that, they were tainted by the fact that the family received so much in a settlement. So two potential juries were removed just based on that. And
it's also the reason why they were trying to move it to another location. They were trying to use the fact that the family winning the civil case meant that it was going to be impossible to really put together a jury pool in that city that wasn't tainted.
Right, because these settlements, again, come out of taxpayer dollars. So the community is paying for this.
The community paid that 27 million, right? So that's all money that's not going to go to services. That's money that's not going to go to many places: education, homelessness, domestic violence, mental health. But yeah, that's one of my major issues with policing. As it stands right now, specifically in Los Angeles, is that the police and sheriff's departments are already receiving more than 50% of our budget, and an LA budget is millions. I'm trying to think. It's like
it's some crazy number. I remember somebody broke it down like in a tweet, and they're like, "Oh, even if you look at our budget, which was like billions of dollars, they're like, if you break it down by day, it's only like 11 million a day or something crazy like that."
11 million a day.
Yeah,
11 million a day. But that, like, the institution of policing as it currently stands is draining our society, right? So even if you are pro cop, even if you believe that we need cops, we need someone to be here to handle the bad guys or to certain situations. If they were any other organization, they would have been shut down because of the amount of money that they are sucking and replaced with something else, right? It isn't we get rid of cops and now when there's a murder, yes, there's a murder. Like, it isn't that notion of cops or nothing. We were always there before there were cops, because as Amoya said, they derive from the era of slavery. The reason why cops were really, the early part of cops had to do with catching slaves who ran away, right? Before we had cops, there was murder, there was theft, that has always existed, right? And so the way to address those issues, which we now know because of studies, lots of time and energy that we have put into this, is services, right? People are more likely to kill, to steal when they have their backs against the wall, when they don't have choices, where they don't have funds, where they can't protect themselves, where they can't provide for themselves, where they can't live, right? And we all are, like, I know everything is like connected. We already know the majority of folks who can't, actually, let me try to wrap that up. Most people in those situations require services. Once they have those services, once they have the means to live, then that behavior goes away, right? And throwing them in prisons only amplifies that behavior because it takes away their ability to get resources once they have left prison, right?
Resources, jobs, all of that. Yeah.
Hey fam, can I share my screen just real quick? Is that okay?
Sure.
I want to share this article here. Let me know if you guys can see it. Can you guys see it?
I can see it.
Okay. So this article comes from the lamag.com. And I just want to briefly go over. Can you see me scrolling?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. It looks like LAPD's annual budget is $3 billion. And I'll just read this paragraph. It says the reductions, and it looks like Garcetti is referring to Garcetti. It says the reductions come as the LAPD is being buffeted by an array of political, economic, and other swells. The department, like law enforcement agencies across the nation, has endured intense scrutiny in the wake of the May killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. Okay. Black Lives Matter led to calls to, quote unquote, defund the police. Although Los Angeles leaders rejected the demands of some activists to reduce the LAPD's, as I said before, $3 billion annual budget by as much as 98%, the council and Garcetti did agree to the $150 million pullback and to begin to look at what type of calls could be handled with non-armed or non-LAPD personnel. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and there you go.
Yeah. LA's police budget is higher than North Korea's entire country's like defensive budget. And in LA, our homelessness is through the roof right now. Like the amount of under and low paid individuals who literally cannot make ends meet is through the roof, which is increasing domestic violence, which is like the poverty, the stress, everything that goes with it. That 300 million, or I already forgot the number, but that like even 50% of that budget would do wonders for our education system, which is completely dilapidated and falling apart out here.
Well, they did allude to that in the article that they were going to cut back, scale back to 150.
And they did. They cut $150 million from
out of $3 billion,
right? Which is,
I think it was $3 billion, right?
It was $3 billion. You said,
and they
cut
150
million.
Yes, and if you dig in deeper, where LAPD decided to because now they have 150 million less in their budget, they went after family programs, right? They were able to make those cuts by taking from community oriented stuff which I'm glad they need to be out of our communities, period. Like, we don't need y'all shooting basketball with our kids. We don't need y'all cooking out. Like, that doesn't help us, right? That doesn't change that our bodies are a constant threat no matter what we are doing. If we are sleeping, if we are walking, if we are reading, if we are just playing, just living, right? It doesn't change any of that. But the idea of cutting programs for women and kids because you lost 150 million, out of this $3 billion budget, is just another constant attack on the people. And to me is a constant reassurance that they are not here for us. Right? Because they could have cut that from their weaponry. We don't need 15 helicopters in the air.
Right. From the robo dogs that they're about to deploy. I keep saying that the robo dogs are about to be sicked on everybody.
Their drone usage, their excessive surveillance, right? I ask people in other cities, I'm like, when I go to my local neighborhood supermarkets, it's the LA Police Department that has a motor joint there with cameras and just literally just tracking us at the supermarket. We live in occupied spaces by the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, I know when I was living in South Central, man, I used to hear quote unquote, I didn't make this up, the ghetto bird. The
ghetto birds, that's exactly what they call them.
Almost every single day.
Multiple times a day.
It was like normal. I was just like, this doesn't seem like.
Because they deploy them for minuscule reasons. That's what happened with Stephon Clark. They deployed the ghetto bird. He was out there. He's the guy, his 3rd year death anniversary out here in Sacramento. He was gunned down by police in his grandmother's backyard. But the reason that they came out to apprehend him is he was breaking car windows. And my thing was in San Francisco, smash and grabs is a no time crime. So why are you deploying helicopters and, police and going after him in his grandmother's home when basically it's a no time crime? But they still, put the helicopters in the air and black guy ends up dead.
Yeah, it's highly disruptive, especially now during COVID when all the kids are at home learning. In their house, you're not in schools with thick concrete walls, so you don't hear it as much. But the ghetto birds, these helicopters, they're up, doesn't matter, 10, 1, 3 in the morning. They wake me up all the time.
Okay, well, I guess, we've been here for a little bit over an hour now talking about this. There's still lots to discuss. But like Chris briefly said when he got a moment to talk when he came and visited us here, is that I guess we just all have to remain diligent. We can't go back to sleep on this. We need to, I know it's I can't overstate that, there's so much information coming after us, but it's important for us to follow, what happens, what's the outcome of these cases, and not just, go back to sleep because they feel we have a less racist president in office, which I don't even think that's an accurate statement because, it's just whether you like your racism overt or covert.
Exactly. Racism is racism, okay? I don't care that it comes with a smile. It's still racism.
That's even actually more dangerous. I'm like, I prefer my racism raw. Let me know. So.
Exactly. I wish I could remember, but Malcolm X has a great quote about that. About the wolves in the South and I can't remember the whole thing, but I would much rather know who you are and where you are up front so that I can I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do regardless. But that deceitful smile is so much more infuriating to me than like outright racism.
Right. I know how to deal with, overt racism. Well, covert racism tries to make you feel like you the crazy one. Like
It's like gaslighting.
yeah. Gaslighting, definitely. So
Yeah, I know that, and I know we should probably break out of here because it is a little bit above the hour. But if anybody is unfamiliar with Dr. Amos Wilson, go look him up. But Dr. Amos Wilson has a great perspective on what he calls projection. And basically, the idea about projection, as you were saying, Kim, is that somebody will say something to make you, who's the victim, look like you're the culprit. And it's like, you're trying to project your your perspective on me when I'm the victim. So oftentimes that does happen with us within the media as well. So that's my 2 cents, and that's all I want to
all
say.
right. Well, then I guess we can get out of here and enjoy the rest of our Sunday. And like I said, just stay diligent, stay on top of it, and don't let them let you think you the crazy one.
That part.
Right.
Stay up,
And I'm
fam.
gonna go out with this HR 40 video because that never gets old. That's still moving through Congress. It still needs changes. So we still need amplified voices on the Fix HR 40 campaign, which you can find on Twitter and all other social media outlets. And with that, I'll say peace out.
Justice! Now! Racial injustice is still the black man's burden and the white man's shame. Justice! Now! So wherever we live in America, we have to face the fact honestly that racial discrimination is